They say a mother's love knows no bounds. I believed that, once. I lived it. And for 60 years, I wore that belief like a second skin, soft, comforting, and eventually, suffocating. My name is Linda. I'm 60 years old. I used to be a school librarian in a small town just outside Portland, Oregon. Nothing fancy, just the smell of old books, rows of worn paperbacks, and kids who'd rather sneak comic books than read Shakespeare. It was enough. Quiet. Predictable. Until Sophie needed me. Sophie. My only child. My everything. She'd been married to Ryan for 3 years when the phone call came. I still remember the tremble in her voice, masked with laughter, like she was trying to make it all sound like an adventure instead of a crisis. "Mom, we're thinking of buying a house," she said. Thinking? No. They were desperate. Rent had gone up again, their apartment was moldy and cramped, and Ryan had just lost another freelance gig. Sophie's job at the nonprofit barely covered groceries. "You don't have to say yes," she added, voice low. "But if there's anything you can do, just to help with the down payment, we'd be able to get out of this hole. We'd pay you back. We could even live together for a while. You know, multi-generational, like the Europeans do." She chuckled nervously. I didn't need time to think. I didn't need to calculate. I simply said, "Of course." The truth was, I had been saving for years. Not for anything specific. Just in case. After Harold died, my husband, Sophie's father, I'd lived frugally. No vacations, no new car. I downsized to a 1-bedroom and kept clipping coupons like it was still the 90s. All those little sacrifices had added up. Over $200,000 sat in my savings. And I gave it to her. The day we went to the bank, Ryan smiled like I was the answer to all his prayers. He even kissed my cheek. "You're a blessing, Linda," he said. "This is your home, too." I signed over the cashier's check without hesitation. 3 weeks later, the house was theirs. A charming colonial on a quiet street with a cherry tree in the front yard. 3 bedrooms. A deck that looked out over a stretch of woods. My new room would be upstairs, they said. Sophie even bought me a little armchair for reading by the window. I sold the rest of my furniture. Donated my dishes. Gave away the hand-stitched quilt my mother left me, thinking I was going somewhere permanent. Somewhere I belonged. Moving day came, and I remembered the sunlight streaming through the windows as I placed my few boxes in the upstairs bedroom. Ryan was busy calling the Wi-Fi company. Sophie was showing off the kitchen on FaceTime to a friend. I just stood there. For a moment, I felt hopeful. Like maybe I hadn't just given up everything, I'd traded it for a family again. That hope didn't last long. The first sign was the mail. A few weeks in, I noticed that none of it had my name on it, not even junk mail. I asked Sophie if she'd updated the utilities. She nodded quickly. "We didn't want to complicate anything, Mom. Less paperwork this way. You're already here. It doesn't matter whose name is on the bills." It mattered to me. But I let it go. Then came the conversation about space. "Ryan and I just need a bit more privacy," Sophie said one evening, chewing her lip. "You're always welcome here, but maybe we can set some boundaries. Like knocking before entering shared areas, and maybe not using the main bathroom when Ryan's home?" I nodded, heart quietly breaking. I used to bathe her in that same tub when she was a baby. Still, I convinced myself it was normal. Growing pains. It was a Tuesday morning when I found the folder. I was looking for printer paper in the desk drawer downstairs and saw a manila folder marked, Home Docs. I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. But I saw my name, crossed out in blue pen. Underneath it, in all caps, title, Ryan plus Sophie only. A chill ran down my spine. I opened the folder. Mortgage paperwork. The deed. My name was nowhere. Not even as a co-signer. Just a bank transfer record with my account number, and a red check mark next to the payment. That night, I asked Sophie. She didn't deny it. We talked about this, Mom, she said, voice rising defensively. You said you wanted to help us. We didn't ask for ownership terms. I thought we were sharing this, I replied. I thought this was our home. Her eyes narrowed. Ryan and I need independence. We're grateful, but we can't be tied down by guilt. You gave us a gift. Don't try to take it back with expectations. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just walked upstairs, sat in my little armchair, and stared out at the woods until the sun rose. It was no longer my home. It never was. You'd think the worst part would be the day I found out. But no, the worst part came later, slowly, deliberately, like a paper cut that keeps reopening. After that conversation, things changed. Not overnight, but inch by inch. The first thing to go was my voice. Not literally, of course. But in that house, I became quieter. They made decisions without me. Dinner plans. Furniture changes. Even holidays. When I offered to host Thanksgiving, Ryan said, actually, we're thinking of just doing something with friends this year. Less stress. I smiled. I nodded. I shrank. Then came the shelf. Sophie rearranged the living room and asked if I could move my books to the upstairs room. We're trying to make the space feel more ours, she said. Mine were the only hardcovers in that house. Everything else was decorative, framed quotes, fake plants, empty vases. I packed them up. Again. But the moment that gutted me came one rainy afternoon. I returned from the grocery store, arms full, soaked from head to toe. I went to unlock the front door, and the key didn't work. I tried again. Nothing. I knocked. Ryan opened the door, looking surprised. Oh. We changed the locks. Sophie meant to tell you. She didn't. He stepped aside. Come in, come in. Sorry. We thought you were going to that church retreat this week. Miscommunication. I entered the house, my hands trembling, rain dripping onto their pristine hardwood floor. Later that evening, I tried to bring it up. If you're going to change the locks again, can you at least let me know? Sophie's face went cold. Mom, you've been acting like this is your place. But we need boundaries. Ryan and I feel like we're walking on eggshells. My throat tightened. I gave you everything I had. And we're thankful, she said. But that doesn't mean we owe you our lives. I didn't respond. What would I even say? That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the broken key in my palm like a relic of something sacred. Something lost. The next morning, I packed a single suitcase. I didn't announce it. I didn't slam the door. I just left. Took the bus to the other side of town and checked into a weekly motel. It smelled like bleach and cigarettes. But it had a bed. A lock. And for the first time in months, I felt safe. I texted Sophie, I've moved out. I'll be in touch later. She replied 3 hours later. Okay. Hope you're doing what's best for you. No apology. No concern. Just distance. And for the first time, I stopped crying. The motel room was dim, smelled of mildew, and buzzed faintly with the sound of a dying ceiling light. But it was mine. For the first time in months, I could sit without someone sighing at my presence, walk without stepping around unspoken resentment, and breathe without guilt thickening the air. I spent the first 2 nights doing nothing but staring at the cracked ceiling. I didn't have a plan. I didn't even have a pillow of my own, I used a rolled-up sweater. But somehow, the lack of a plan felt better than the illusion of family I'd clung to. On the 3rd day, I took a bus to the community center. They had a corkboard full of flyers. I scanned the rooms for rent section and tore off a number. Her name was Marjorie. Widow. 74. Rented out her basement to help pay for her prescriptions. The room was windowless, but it had a small kitchenette, a working heater, and she didn't ask many questions. "I've got a good feeling about you," she said, pouring tea. "But I should tell you, I've had younger tenants who left in the middle of the night. You don't look like the type." I smiled, holding the teacup with both hands. "I'm not going anywhere." The days blurred. I picked up small shifts at the library 2 days a week, just enough to keep busy, just enough to hear the shuffle of book pages and the quiet gratitude of readers. But something else began to bloom. Marjorie introduced me to her knitting group at the senior center. On Tuesdays, we'd gather around mismatched couches and sip lukewarm coffee, hands moving with purpose. I started knitting tiny blankets, soft, colorful squares for NICU babies. Word spread. A young woman named Dana, barely 30, joined us one morning. She sat beside me and whispered, "My mom kicked me out when I told her I was pregnant. Your story, it made me feel less alone." I hadn't told my story. Not fully. But I had cried once, silently, during a lull in conversation, and they had seen. That group became more than a hobby. It became a lifeline. One rainy Friday, I returned from the library and found a letter tucked into my mailbox. The handwriting was familiar. Sophie. "Hi Mom. I hope you're doing okay. Ryan and I are going through a rough time. The mortgage is getting too much. We might have to sell. I know you're upset. But maybe we can talk. We could use your advice, maybe some help." No apology. No acknowledgement of what had happened. Just need. Again. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat down at my tiny desk and started a letter of my own. Not for her. For me. For the woman who gave everything, and finally remembered what it was like to keep something for herself. I wrote. "You told me you wanted independence. So did I. I just never said it out loud." That night, I walked around the small space I now called home. I ran my fingers along the edge of the bookshelf. I turned on the bedside lamp. I touched the doorknob, cold, metal, solid. My door. My lock. My key. Fall crept in slowly, painting the trees in fire-colored leaves and chilling the morning air. My little basement room was never warm, but I had my sweaters, my tea, and my peace. Marjorie's knitting group had turned into something more. We started meeting on Saturdays, too. Not just to knit, but to talk. Share. Cry. Laugh. One woman, Judith, left a husband who'd controlled her every breath for 30 years. Another, Camila, was fighting her own daughter for custody of her grandchild. We were all warriors, wounded and wise. It was Judith who first called me a leader. "You listen more than you speak," she said. "And when you do speak, it feels like something sacred." I didn't know what to do with that. But I said thank you. And I started showing up for more people, not because I had to, but because I could. Because I wanted to. One Thursday morning, I saw Sophie again. It was at the farmer's market. I was holding a jar of peach preserves, squinting at the label, when I heard her voice. "Mom?" She looked thinner. Pale. There were dark circles under her eyes and a tremble in her hands. She didn't hug me. Just stared, like I was a stranger who knew too much. "We lost the house," she said. I didn't ask how. "We're staying with Ryan's cousin. It's tight." I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I nodded. That was all. Just a nod. Do you think we could have dinner sometime?" she asked. I looked at her. Really looked. The daughter I'd raised. The woman who'd once clung to my leg in department stores and now couldn't meet my eyes for more than a second. I said carefully, you should do what's best for you. And so should I. She bit her lip. Okay. I understand. And she walked away. That night, I made stew. Real, hearty, beef and carrots kind. I invited Marjorie, Judith, and 2 women from the center. We sat in my little room, elbows brushing, knees touching under a fold-out table. We laughed until we cried. When everyone left, I washed dishes with music playing low on the radio. Then I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, sat in my reading chair, and watched the steam rise. I thought of Sophie. Of the house. Of the cherry tree in the yard that never got the chance to bloom for me. I didn't feel rage anymore. Or betrayal. Just a soft ache. Like a healed scar that only twinges in the rain. I reached for the letter I'd written months ago, the one I never sent. I read it once more. Then I folded it, slid it into an envelope, and tucked it into a drawer. Not to be mailed. Just to remember. A month later, I signed a lease for a small trailer home in the woods. It had a porch swing and enough space for all my books. The title was in my name. Solely mine. On Thanksgiving, I hosted dinner. For Marjorie. For Judith. For Dana and her baby. We held hands before the meal. No one said grace. But in the silence, I gave thanks for something I'd never had before, a life that belonged only to me. As the last guest left, I stood on my porch, watching the stars shimmer above the trees. And I whispered to the dark. They thought I needed a room in their house. But what I needed was a door I could close, and a key that was mine.